and inside Putin's Russia.
There's this grievance that's sort of eating away at him.
For stories that get you closer to life. Think Wednesday.
Tonight on Arizona PBS. Explore new ideas and new worlds here on Arizona PBS, a community service of Arizona State University.
The easiest and best way to support Arizona PBS is by becoming a sustaining member. Your monthly contribution of $5 or more comes directly from your bank account or credit card, so you know your membership is always current. It also means no more renewal notices in your mailbox. So more of your dollars go to the programs you love. It's convenient for you, greener for us, and better for the planet. Become a sustaining member today.
Coming up next on Arizona PBS, Life and World.
Your favorite PBS shows, ready to watch when you are. Anytime, any place. Find more ways to explore than ever before.
Coming soon to Arizona PBS.
Next time on the Vietnam War.
When you know you're gonna die, the fear leaves.
As the war grinds on, young American men face a difficult choice.
I don't think a military mom would want to announce my son is a deserter.
And chaos reigns at the Democratic Convention in Chicago.
I turned on the television and I thought the country was coming apart at the seams.
As the Vietnam War continues.
Tuesday night at 8 on Arizona PBS. Support for Arizona PBS comes from viewers like you and from
Hospice of the Valley, medical, social, and spiritual care for patients nearing end of life, and support for their families. A not-for-profit community hospice, HOV.org.
From the Cronkite Studios in downtown Phoenix, this is Cronkite News.
Nationwide, 11.3% of Americans are uninsured as the open enrollment period for health care begins today. Find out how your premiums are expected to change.
Plus, a new beginning, why former Arizona Congresswoman Gabby Giffords is changing the name of her public safety group.
And waiting for your flight at the airport, you wouldn't want to find one of these on your seat. How Sky Harbor is dealing with their bed bug problem.
Cronkite News starts now.
Good evening and welcome to Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Madison Connor.
And I'm Tyler Finger. Thank you for joining us. Open enrollment for the Affordable Care Act begins today, and premiums are expected to be down across Arizona. Cronkite News reporter Trevor Fay went to a panel hosted by the Washington Post where concerns are high that ACA signups will still be dangerously low.
The residents only have half as much time to sign up, 45 days, cut from 90 in previous years. DJ Quinlan, partner at an Arizona consulting firm, says the program is being undercut by the White House.
They've taken away a lot of the advertising to remind people about the enrollment period. The enrollment period has actually been shortened, when in most years in the past it's actually been lengthened. So it's really important that we get the word out to folks.
It's not just lack of ads that may cause problems, but a reduction in navigators, the people who help consumers find the plan that works best for them.
The navigators do spend a lot of time trying to find out what resources can they help a consumer take advantage of.
The Trump administration cut funding for navigators by 92%, which Ray fears will leave consumers uninformed when signing up for plans. Jennifer Tolbert of the Kaiser Family Foundation says although Arizona will have a shortened enrollment period, not all Arizonans will be subject to the 45-day time frame.
For people who are eligible for Medicaid or the Children's Health Insurance Program, they can sign up for coverage throughout the year.
Despite uncertainty about the fate of the Affordable Care Act, Tolbert stresses that the ACA is still the law and warns that those who choose not to get health insurance will still be forced to pay a penalty. In Washington, Trevor Fay, Cronkite News.
Arizona is one of the 39 states that take part in the federal marketplace.
With the enrollment period cut in half this year, people only have 6 weeks to sign up for coverage. Reporter Emily Richardson talked with people here in Arizona to see how the enrollment process is going.
The insurance company with the employer costs us about $3,000 a month, and this drastically reduces us and helps us, or else we wouldn't be able to afford that insurance where we would need.
Donald Kennedy is renewing his health insurance coverage today through the Marketplace. He and his wife are retired and depend on the low-cost coverage they signed up for today. Saving money is one of the main reasons David Aguirre from Cover AZ says people are finding insurance through the Affordable Care Act.
It's very important because we know healthcare costs has gone up a lot. So if you don't have a health insurance, then when you end up in a hospital or something, then it will break your bank.
Others say ACA coverage helps provide preventative services, many times without charging a copay.
Cervical cancer, breast cancer screenings, all the stuff that people can access when they have health insurance at no copay, that's just really critical. We've heard stories from women who've had breast cancer diagnosed early enough so that they have a simple lumpectomy, they're able to recover quickly from cancer.
Cover AZ wants Arizonans to use their website to connect with local application assisters such as Cogue Health Connection Center in Phoenix. Having assistance with your application can increase your savings on health insurance.
People that fill out an application on their own are much more likely to make mistakes.
Kennedy says he believes it's important for the general public to get help with finding coverage.
Representatives are very knowledgeable, where we're just out there kind of stumbling around the internet trying to figure out which way to go and which plan would be the best, and they kind of compile it all here and everything's right in one area.
All you need to do to get help finding coverage is make an appointment and bring in the proper papers and identification. In Phoenix, Emily Richardson, Cronkite News.
Cover AZ is allowing Arizonans to make appointments for help finding coverage through December 15th.
Arizona Governor Doug Ducey is looking for any way to continue a health care program for low-income children after Congress failed to renew it earlier this month. Cronkite News reporter Bridget Dowd tells us how this could affect Arizona families.
The Kids Care program covers about 23,000 children whose parents make too much money to qualify for Medicaid, but still struggle to pay those out-of-pocket costs that come with private health insurance. Simon Cossum is Director of Health Policy for the Children's Action Alliance, a nonprofit that works on behalf of children's issues around the state. Cossum says that without Kids Care, she fears tens of thousands of families would go uninsured, and one mom in particular comes to mind.
She's, working hard to make ends meet, but she told me at the point of tears that without Kids Care, she'd be faced between the decision of food on the table and medicine for her daughter. And there are, I think, more families than we realize who are faced with these really hard decisions.
Cossum says while Kids Care may feel like a cost now, it sets children up for success and is an investment in the future of Arizona. Governor Ducey says he's even considering dipping into the state's rainy day fund as a temporary fix, but has every confidence that Congress will act. In Phoenix, Bridget Dowd, Cronkite News.
New discoveries about the man facing federal terrorism charges in deadliest New York terror incident since 9/11. According to police, the 29-year-old immigrant from Uzbekistan, Sayfullo Saipov, planned this attack for weeks and did so in the name of ISIS. Today, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio said the terror attack will not shake them.
My message to all New Yorkers is do what you do best. Be New Yorkers. Be strong, be proud, be resilient. Show the whole world right now that we will not be moved by terror.
Saipov was not on any U.S. government terror watch list and had recently passed a background check to drive for Uber.
In response to the event, President Trump tweeted this morning criticizing the diversity visa lottery program, which allowed the suspect to enter the U.S. legally in 2010. He said, quote, "The terrorists came into our country through what is called the diversity visa lottery program, a Chuck Schumer beauty. I want merit-based." To this, New York Senator Chuck Schumer responded that he wants a president who is a leader, not a tweeter.
If he really wanted to do something, the way we can stop terrorism is anti-terrorism funding to help our New York Police Department and all of our police departments. He cut that in the budget he proposed.
President Trump said today in Washington that he would seriously consider sending the New York attacker to Guantanamo Bay prison.
It was a terror attack in Tucson 6 years ago that left then Arizona Congresswoman Gabby Giffords severely wounded. And the mass shooting in Sandy Hook the following year spurred Giffords and husband Mark Kelly to found Americans for Responsible Solutions, which promotes stricter gun legislation. Now there's change in store for the organization, as Bailey Vogt reports.
Former Arizona Congresswoman Gabby Giffords has been the face of Americans for Responsible Solutions since the gun safety group began 5 years ago. Now, hers will be the name of the group as well.
When we first started this organization, we talked a lot about responsibility. But what we've sort of shifted into is engaging in the basic question of public safety.
Peter Ambler is executive director of the newly named Giffords. He said the organization wanted a name that exemplified courage.
We knew ultimately that there's only one way to go, and that's by naming it after Gabby herself, because there's nobody in this country that exemplifies courage more than she does.
Sonal Marvancheryl, assistant professor of marketing at American University's Kogod School of Business, said that the name change could mean a fresh start for the organization.
Instead of just focusing on maybe Americans for Responsible Solutions, this is now focusing on the person's name. There's a personalization associated with Giffords, who's very much of a household name in Arizona and presumably in Washington.
Marvancheryl also says that naming the organization after Giffords herself can provide a narrative to drive the cause.
It's an advantage because she can definitely use her first-hand experience and story, and now the story becomes part of the brand name.
Ambler says the name change will assist Giffords in its fight for what they see as sensible gun legislation.
It's not a quick fight, it's not an easy fight, but it's something that we need to be committed to over the long haul.
In Washington, Bailey Vogt, Cronkite News.
In addition to the name change for the main organization, Giffords also announced a rebranding for its Political Action Committee and a legal research center, now known as Giffords PAC and Giffords Law Center.
It's been 2 days since Special Counsel Robert Mueller announced charges against 3 advisors of President Trump's campaign. Former campaign chairman Paul Manafort surrendered to the FBI but pleaded not guilty to charges that he laundered millions of dollars through shell companies overseas. Campaign advisor Rick Gates was also charged and pled guilty. Now, more of President Trump's colleagues are being put under the magnifying glass. The president's communication director, Hope Hicks, will speak to Mueller's team sometime this month. When asked if he was planning on firing Special Counsel Robert Mueller, President Trump simply answered no. Arizona Senator Jeff Flake also commented that firing Mueller would be something the president should steer clear from.
That's a third rail we can't touch, either firing or pardoning those who were indicted. Short-circuiting the process there that wouldn't be handled well.
There was a recent proposal to build an aerial tram, new restaurants, and a hotel in the Grand Canyon.
Coming up on Cronkite News, find out if the multi-million-dollar project was given the green light.
Plus, do you find yourself caught in rush hour traffic? Find out how ADOT is using technology to help drivers avoid long waits.
I'm Judy Woodruff, anchor and managing editor of the PBS NewsHour. The journalists of tomorrow face a fast-changing media landscape, but quality news remains vitally important to our communities, our country, and our world. At ASU's Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication, students learn solid, reliable reporting, holding the powerful accountable, and rebuilding the public's trust. The Cronkite School and Arizona PBS, preparing the next generation for a stronger future of journalism.
When a story comes in the morning, we're out the door as fast as we can go.
But it's also great to spend more time in communities and produce projects.
From the borderlands to the cities, the reservations, and even the state capitol, we want to get to the heart of the matter.
When the lights come on in the studio, we know our hard work is about to pay off.
We love what we do here at Cronkite News.
We're proud to tell the stories of our state.
Now, more than ever, it's important to have a trusted news source, and that's Cronkite News.
Inmates at Towers Jail are one day into a hunger strike in hopes of change in their daily meals. Sheriff Paul Penzone came out today to respond to those inmates who are unhappy with the taste of the food they're being served.
Every part of this meal has been evaluated for its nutritional content to meet that standard. Not just by our in-house full-time nutritionist, but the courts have been a part of this process to ensure that we're meeting those expectations.
Each inmate gets 2 meals, one in the morning, which has bread, an apple, and peanut butter, as well as one meal in the evening that includes a vegetable bean soup, pickles, and even cookies. But families of inmates held a news conference yesterday calling the food slop. Sheriff Penzone wants to make clear that if these inmates don't like their 2 meals a day, they're more than welcome to pay extra to order limited meals from a cantina.
The Navajo Nation has decided not to build the Grand Canyon Escalade project. The proposal included restaurants and a hotel, along with an aerial tram to take visitors from the East Rim to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. Navajo Nation leaders voted 16-2 not in favor of the project. The Navajo Nation would have had to invest $65 million if the project went through.
Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport is dealing with a bed bug problem. The airport removed several padded benches near a security checkpoint in Terminal 4 because they were infested with the pests. The airport says the bed bugs were only in 3 benches removed last night, but a pest control company is coming out to make sure they're gone.
The Arizona Department of Transportation is launching a new app to get you where you are going faster. The ADA Alerts app uses geofencing technology to send notifications to mobile devices in specifically affected areas. With targeted alerts sent early, drivers can have time to choose an alternate route and avoid sitting in lengthy traffic backups. The app is free to download, and no sign-ups or email registrations are required.
Most people get their first job as a teen, but some youth struggle more than others to find work.
Coming up on Cronkite News, how a South Phoenix job fair is restoring hope for the young and unemployed.
Plus, it was cool and clear today. I'll have a live look at your forecast when we come back.
This fall.
I'm so excited!
What? From the inspiring to the amazing.
You're in the presence of history.
The compelling.
He said, "Welcome home." It was just a powerful moment.
To the astounding.
I promised myself I wouldn't cry.
And from the breathtaking.
This is real.
A journey to Mars.
To the electrifying.
We're going to change the world.
All this and more. All this fall.
Oh my God!
Fridays, it's at Cronkite News, your social sharing connection where you choose the news. Facebook likes and shares, tweets, retweets, and favorites. YouTube views and subscriptions. We're watching you watch us. From our digital home at cronkitenews.azpbs.org to your television, web browser, or mobile device. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Then join us for at Cronkite News, our weekly refresh, each Friday at 5 on Arizona PBS.
I'm Ted Simons, host and managing editor of Arizona Horizon. Join us each weekday at 5:30 and 10 as we bring you the top newsmakers who impact the state. We cover the stories in depth that shape and affect our local communities, and we take the time to ensure that all voices are equally heard. For more than 30 years, Arizona Horizon has been your voice and your source for what matters most, right here on Arizona PBS.
Children who travel to Arizona from Central and South America by themselves are trying to heal from that traumatic event through art. Reporter Nicole Gutierrez sat down with the program coordinator and tells us how these art programs are helping children learn how to express their emotions in a positive way.
10 boys from Central and South America that were in unaccompanied minor shelters participated in the Professional Arts Series, where they painted masterpieces that are now displayed in the Phoenix Art Museum.
It was one thing working on their portrait in front of them, but it was something else walking into that room with all of the bright lights shining on their artwork. So they were very proud, you could tell.
The Phoenix Art Museum, a local artist, and the Free Arts Program for Abused Children of Arizona came together for this exhibit, El Alma de mis Raíces, the soul of my roots. It helped the children express their traumatic journey in a positive way.
The boys went to the Phoenix Art Museum. That was their very first time at a museum. They had never been to a museum before, little less, found the thought of having an exhibit of their own at one of the most important museums here in the Valley. This is where we get to partner with not only one of the shelters, but also with a cultural partner. In this case, it was the Phoenix Art Museum, and then with a local artist. And Emily Costello is the artist that participated in this series.
A series of 7 nights that Manessa says will last a lifetime for the children that participated in the program.
This was something that this was an experience that they were going to carry with them for the rest of their lives. Yes, they have their artwork, but what they learned and how they grew, how they felt that they grew throughout this series is something that they will be able to have forever.
The 10 boys who participated in this series are children from local shelters that provide assistance for unaccompanied minors who have traveled to the U.S. unaccompanied and are currently detained and are awaiting the outcomes of their court case. In Phoenix, Nicole Gutierrez, Cronkite News.
Their exhibit will be displayed at the Phoenix Art Museum through November 15th.
They're young and able, but somewhere they got off track. They may have had to leave school and have had trouble finding work. Reporter Sydney Eisenberg shows us how one group is working to help disenfranchised youth.
Phoenix youth were given a special opportunity today, a chance to gain employment they may have struggled to find.
I think it starts with our youth, and we have great benefits for them, as well as giving them the experience that they may need in their future.
More than 10 employers were at the Cesar Chavez Library to offer on-the-spot jobs and interview opportunities for youth. Hospitality, financial, and food service were just some of the industries with open positions. The fair targeted 16 to 24-year-olds who are unemployed, disconnected from school, and live in South Phoenix. Participants were also able to practice their interview skills and through mock interviews, as well as apply for other positions through application stations. Opportunity Youth plans on having 2 other job fairs in 2018. In the Broadcast Center, Sydney Eisenberg, Cronkite News.
It's officially November, and it's starting to feel like fall.
Yeah, the temperatures are finally about where they should be. Let's take a look right now at the temperature outside. 83 degrees, mostly clear, and that's about just a little bit above average. 84 was our high today, the average 82, and as we take a look across the state, not much in terms of any rain on the radar. Pretty clear out there, and then as we move through into the valley, the temperatures out across the state, 56 up in Flagstaff, 61 up at the Grand Canyon, and 81 out in Lake Havasu. Here in the valley, though, temperatures pretty much the same, about 80 degrees across from the east to the west, and that temperature will slowly go down by 10 p.m., 72 in Phoenix and 66 out in Mesa. And as we move through the rest of the night, the temperature going to drop even more by 7 a.m. Just as the sun is rising, it'll be 63 in Phoenix and out in the West Valley, 56 in Buckeye. And the forecast, though, we are going to be going back up a little bit to 84 on Saturday, and as we look at the rest of the weekend and into next week, temperature will go back down to 79 on Tuesday and then up a little bit to 81. And finally, it will be nice outside, Madison.
Still ahead on Cronkite News, cleaning up the community. We show you how one group is trying to restore a sense of neighborhood pride.
Hello from the children of planet Earth.
Exploring, it's the lifeblood of the mission.
Human beings are a curious bunch.
What are we going to see when we get really close?
Wow.
Just because an idea is crazy, it's not necessarily wrong.
We were on our way.
You don't get anywhere until you've tested the limits.
That carries an intensity you can't imagine.
You could hear people just, whoa.
Oh my God, absolutely spectacular.
It's a rush. We ask a lot of our heroes.
We are at a remarkable moment.
We're going farther than any exploration ever has.
Not too many people would be excited to get up before sunrise on a Saturday, but that's exactly what hundreds of people did in one West Valley neighborhood. With a goal of new sense of pride, Cronkite News reporter Alex Valdez was there and shows how they did it.
A neighborhood located just north of 35th Avenue in Buckeye has seen its fair share of garbage, overgrown shrubs, and dirt. These are the reasons why this neglected and forgotten part of Phoenix was chosen by Chicanos por la Casa for their 9th annual Barrios Bellos, an event steered towards transforming communities. Weed whackers, rakes, and trash bags weren't the only tools needed to help restore this barrio. An army of volunteers was also on hand providing the elbow grease and the passion to get Cuban Park neighborhood cleaned up.
You have the wealthy Latinos, people that are well off, and then you have the very poor Latinos. And right here is one of those neighborhoods.
Every year, Chicanos por la Casa picks a neighborhood in need of a makeover, often found in Hispanic communities. But don't be fooled. Those who live and work in this area see the beauty that lies underneath all that dirt.
Community support is a huge passion of mine. It's embedded within me, so I do love to give back.
Over 300 volunteers came and rolled up their sleeves at the 9th annual Barrios Bellos cleanup event to help beautify a part of Phoenix that Chicanos por la Casa says is often overlooked.
What really hits home is where we live in. You know, a lot of our team members do live in this community, within the community, so definitely a great opportunity to, when you do live in this community, to give back.
Chicanos por la Casa says when community members come together to help their own, it creates a domino effect.
We clean up the general areas, being the alleys, the streets. It encourages the people there to clean up their individual home.
Neighbors helping neighbors, no matter where they come from.
We want to connect with everyone, whether you're Latino, Caucasian, African American. It's definitely a great time to really have an opportunity to help out the people that live in this neighborhood.
This is the 9th year the cleanup event is held by Chicanos por la Casa, and the organization says they hope it can serve as a first step to rebuilding certain parts of our community. In the broadcast center, Alex Valdez, Cronkite News.
Cronkite News is proud to be the news division of Arizona PBS. Here's what's coming up on Arizona Horizon and PBS NewsHour.
On the next Arizona Horizon, we'll talk foreign affairs with former NATO Ambassador Kurt Volker, who is now the U.S. Special Representative for Ukraine negotiations. Also joining us will be retired 4-star U.S. Air Force General Philip Breedlove.
I'm Judy Woodruff on the next NewsHour. On the leading edge of science, we revisit the impact of Hurricane Sandy 5 years later. That's Wednesday on the PBS NewsHour.
That's it for Cronkite News tonight. Thanks for joining us.
For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.
I'm pretty scared. I haven't really trained a hawk since Mabel, and that was 10 years ago now.
She's half dragon, half leopard. What I might do is sit with her, try and get across that this voice is not something to be feared. The journey begins.
Tonight at 7 on Arizona PBS. Explore new ideas and new worlds here on Arizona PBS. a community service of Arizona State University.
Arizona PBS programming is brought to you in part by the underwriting support of local businesses. Learn how you can support Arizona PBS and grow your own business by reaching viewers like you. Call 602-496-8664 or azpbs.org/underwriting.
Coming up next on Arizona PBS, Life and World.
Hi, I'm Charlie Rose. As part of the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at ASU, Arizona PBS is providing a state-of-the-art venue for the next generation of journalists. From newsrooms in Washington, Los Angeles, and here in Phoenix, students engage